I'm going to jump to something else you talked about, which is believing that migration is going to be curbed. But I'm going to throw some stuff at you here.
Okay.
Canadian population growth in Q3 was the fastest since 1957. In fact, we grew by almost 300,000 people, and considering we got a population of about 40 million, that is
almost 1%. That's insane.
It's close to 1%. And international migration was just under 95% of that migration.
Okay, hold the phone here. So in Q3, we got 300,000 people?
Yes.
So in one quarter, almost 1 in 100 people are new to this country. So if you go to like a concert hall with like 1,000 people, there's going to be 10 people in there that were not even in this country like 6 months ago.
Correct.
That's insane. Like, I don't know if anyone's thinking about that. That is like insanity, and also kind of why we're probably facing some of these inflationary things that are taking place on both the housing side and everything we consume.
Well, again, that's you implying that it's demand-based inflation. I think it's a supply-based inflation. But
either I mean, if you curb demand and you have no supply, it still goes to zero. Like it's
inflation either way. So this is why. There's the question out now, like, all right, well, how far can the housing market fall? And I do think it has these naturally built-in bottoms, and I do think we did a major correction, a major come down, and now what I'm seeing out there, and I say this anecdotally at least for this point, but I think you can see a leveling off here. It's now a drip, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a one-time correction, and now it's a drip, like marginal decreases. Like there was a time where literally the home down the street sold for $600. Now this home is selling for $525,000, right? Like that happened. I don't want to say overnight, but pretty damn close. And now I see it's like, all right, well, that one's $525. The next one might be $515. The next one might be $510. And we're kind of settling off there. And for a couple reasons. One of them is really interesting. I want to get your take on it. The supply, we've harped on this, is way, 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 way down. Like the sellers just are not selling their home. They're just not. And that's why you're still seeing in major markets, like our market, still 30 to 35% of homes are selling over ask every single week because inventory is so low, and that is helping to protect the pricing. But I want to get it.
I'm losing confidence. Confidence is being lost at a rapid pace over here, almost as fast as the housing market's going down. But no, in all seriousness, so I think, like you said, so right off the hop, there was like this 10% cut on a lot of properties that were kind of overpriced to begin with. Those are the ones that got beat up the most. They weren't great properties, but they were selling like mad because the market was nuts. Then now, like you said, it's more leveled out. And I feel like I look around, I'm like, oh, like now, like you said, they come on, they sell, they get 2 or 3 offers. There's still that kind of pent up demand. I think the original fall wasn't really justified by anything other than sentiment of like people being scared. Like they're seeing all these reels of Chandler talking about the rates going to hell and like stuff like that going on. And now I think we're kind of leveling out because rates are still not that bad. We've talked about it. People can go out and get in 4.5% to 5.5% money, which really a few years ago was pretty normal. And so that's not out of this world for a couple to be able to go out and buy a home that's still in the $500,000-$600,000 range. So here we don't feel it as much. And I do agree that there's a supply issue, but I'm also starting to see a lot more price reductions take place. I'm starting to see withdrawn listings. I'm starting to see houses be
that is a normal market.
Being relisted for less than they just paid a year ago. I'm seeing, like, I'll come across those every day now when I browse through. And I think, we have not felt the pain. Like, I think the pain is to come where, like,
I'm feeling pain, Neal.
I was, that's because you're hungover. No, that's, you're on day 3 of your hangover. But I was in the bank and literally the 2 people in front of me were asking for mortgage deferrals. Like it was awkward because when you're at the teller and like I can hear them and they're talking about asking for mortgage deferral. And I'm like,
it's like, so you realize we don't do that at the teller?
Yeah, we don't do this at the teller, but I can hear it. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I think we're about to go through our Christmas season. The North American culture is to spend, and you feel very bad if you don't. And so everyone's going to feel basically the pressure to spend like they always do. They're already over leveraged. Values are way down. There's going to be a lot of people next year that get beat up. And I think where we're seeing core inflation has not dropped. They're going to keep increasing the rates pretty close to the pace that they have been. And so then anyone who's in the variable products, anyone who's out there now and has any sort of loan or debt, they're going to be in tough shape. And a lot of people went out there and spent a ton of money on cars and auxiliary properties. And like you go to sell secondary property markets are going to start falling off heavily. And so they're going to sell these, take losses there. Man, boats, cars, all this
counterpoint. Stuff. It's still the 3rd best market we've ever seen. You've got this recency bias, man. Like
we're not there yet.
People are doing price reductions. Like, man, like this is
I'm
still
not
the
saying it
third
hasn't
best
happened yet.
market
Though.
ever.
I'm saying it hasn't happened yet. I'm
So-
saying like in the following year, I think it's actually going to happen because right now people aren't selling really because they have to. I think people are going to start selling because they actually have to here at some point.
So here's a couple things to your point.
And like you said, unemployment's going to come, and when unemployment comes,
Yeah, but so the interesting part about this is that sellers are buoying up the market by just refusing to sell, right? Which we kind of expected would happen. We
we
posted
have a
those
high
before.
population of people with no mortgage and low mortgages.
Yeah. There's also a high population of people that are saying, we're going to sell, but we're going to wait till this blows over, which means like they are going to sell. There could be an influx of a lot of homes hit the market in the spring, right? Like you said, like maybe these people are riding it out to see where the dust settles,
Think
and
it's a
they
little
could all come
blip.
up on spring. The other thing is, ironically, you can look at that 14% since March, right? That we're down 14% since March.
Yeah.
We're still up from this time last year.
Yeah.
And in many markets, like we talked about how resilient Alberta's been, we've been very resilient here in Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
Because the sellers are not selling their home and they are keeping prices high, it sort of is giving our boy Tiff permission to just continue turning the screws.
Is he our boy?
I hate that guy.
But yeah, he's
So
exactly. He's
That's
increasing
a
it.
cruel irony. It's like, all right, we're fighting for our lives here as like sellers and property owners. And he's like, you guys have more resilience than I
This
thought.
is it.
Jacking it some more.
That's what I mean. They
Yeah.
have to get you to. They have to get this to turn over, and so they're going to keep doing it until people cave in. The other thing that is similar to the sentiment, it's once the people started seeing prices drop, like just like when people started seeing prices explode, everyone's like, "Man, I got to get 2-3 more properties." Like
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
was scooping properties up left, right, and center. The second people started seeing prices fall right off, they're like, "Oh shit! Like I don't want to be in this. Like I'm going to try and get out." So there's a ton of
Yeah.
people that own second property. What was the ratio of people owning second properties that they're going to start throwing this up, whether it's a rental
Yeah.
or it's a cottage? They're going to be like, "I don't want to hold on to a depreciating asset. Nobody wants a depreciating asset, right?"
Yeah, we're gonna have some stats next week on the drop off of Airbnbs. Like, there's been
Yeah.
like Airbnbs have declined in activity quite significantly. That's a sign of people not
Pulling
spending.
mine
Like
off.
you know, tourism is gonna see the same sort of thing, and part of that's seasonal. Don't get me wrong, a lot of that is seasonal. But I think that's gonna reveal some interesting things because that's people deciding not to spend a little bit of extra money in their local economy most often.
The last thing I want to mention, I already said it once, but Christmas season's on top of, like you're saying, everyone's holding on to their properties, which is kind of making it more tough. And Tiff's like, I'll just keep dialing this up to see what your tolerance is. Going into Christmas, the extra spending will not be helping inflation numbers, right? So like it's like a setup. I don't want to say we're doomed to fail, but I really do think there's going to be a beat down here. And I think a lot of people, like, we can get through this. And if you're smart with your numbers and you watch your stuff, you can get through it. But there are people that are over leveraged that are going to get really beat up. And I think the toughest part is going to come when the unemployment comes, because it doesn't matter if you're like, I was perfectly leveraged, but then if you have no income, you're not perfectly leveraged.
I want to fire some Ontario stuff at you.
All right. mess me
Okay,
up.
so we'll start with Toronto. Go Jays! You did it. In Toronto, downtown Toronto, still 39% of property selling over asking. The city of Toronto, 33% are still selling over asking. In the 905 areas, 26% still selling over asking. Having said that, Toronto for September, once again, for I think like the 7th month in a row, hit a 20-year low in inventory. It dropped just from August to September. The number of deal volumes dropped by 10% just in 1 month. Sales down 10%. From last year, from September of last year, sales are down 44%.
That's insane.
So sales are down 44%, but they're still showing some price resilience in a lot of the micro markets. Interestingly, condos are up. And then low-rise, single-family townhouse stuff is down, but condos are up because people are effectively being pushed to more affordable living, and condos offer that. So that's an interesting take on what's going on in Toronto.
Let me just comment on that really
yeah,
quick.
jump in on it.
So, to what you just said, immigration, 300,000 people in Q3. Probably 70% of those ended up in Toronto. So that in itself is why you're seeing these over ask and this massive demand. But again, if they curb immigration, this game is going to get beat up. Like just that simple.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because, and I'm going to read something here because it's just a lot of stuff at once here, and I don't want to miss stuff. People are actually leaving Ontario a bit more than you might expect. It tends to be people's first destination when they're coming from another country, and then they spread out.
Yep.
So listen to this. In 2021 alone, nearly 108,000 Ontarios left.
Ontarians.
Ontarians? What did I say? Ontarios?
You said Ontarios. Cheerios.
Like Cheerios. over 100,000 Ontarians left the province, and that continued into second quarter of this year when an additional 49,000 left Ontario to go to other provinces, which again, it's their highest interprovincial migration since 1971. About a quarter moved to Alberta, and another quarter moved to the Maritimes. So we are actually getting here in the Maritime provinces, and most of those people, if they're moving to the Maritimes, where are they moving?
Halifax,
Yeah.
but so they got 200,000 and 49,000 left. So they had 150,000 net positive.
I'm just saying it's very interesting to see how many of those are coming here.
There is the
Canada.
largest migration out of there, but we're also having the largest immigration to our country of all time. So it's like there's still net positing a ton of people. Like it is insanity in those places.
Yeah,
we're feeling
also,
it here, and we're having a
we're
slight
getting a
net
rush.
positive, but
yeah.
I'm not to hate on the Maritimes in any shape or form, but I do have some concern that all these people that moved during COVID, we talked about when it first took place. I don't think we're not gonna have 100% retention of these people. Like we're gonna have like 50% retention. Honestly, if that, I think there's a mixture of reasons too. There's lifestyle. Like if you're coming out of Ontario or any other big city and you're moving to the Maritimes in any of these cities, it is a dramatic change in lifestyle that you may have not been prepared for. Your job may be
Pros
like,
and cons with that.
your job for two things might be like, well, it's not COVID anymore, get back in the office, or we're doing downsizes and we're doing cuts. If you don't work in the office, you're getting cut. We don't just have all these people all over the place. The other thing is, like, again, prices start going down and they see more stability in a bigger market, they're going to move back to that. So there's a lot of different things that I'm like, we might not retain. The other one I was going to mention, and I'm seeing this, is they can't even get a house or a rental. Like I had someone message. We had someone message us. This is kind of crazy, but we had a message come in for one of our units the other day, and he said, "Hey, I moved here from Quebec 3 months ago, and my family and I have been at a campsite for 3 months."
Do you know what they're telling international students at Dell right now?
Do you think he's going to stay in
If they don't
Halifax?
have an apartment?
What?
Tell them to go home.
Tents? Oh, home.
They're telling them to go home.
This is what I mean. So they're like, and then you're going to curb the immigrant like.
Yeah, so just to finish the point, though, in the second quarter, both Nova Scotia and New Brunswick saw their greatest net gains from interprovincial migration since 1971. So as there's some downward pressure on the real estate market here in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick, we just took in more people from the rest of the country in the last half century.
Which is, all of these things are amazing, but they don't stimulate the Canadian, basically, industries enough to meet the demand that they created by bringing all these people in to try and fight the issue of the amount of money that they just dispersed into our economy.
Yeah, and it's all these contraction, like, in theory, some of these people will alleviate some pressure on the labor market, but they will then put some pressure onto the housing market. So it's a lot of different forces. If you
I don't know what
curve
the thought process is when you're like, okay, we're going to bring in record numbers of people.
tax dollars.
I understand, but if you don't do any of the stuff with like business incentives to get all the businesses going to service all of these people and to supply all the things that these people need, like, what are they thinking? Like before they're like, okay, we want to add 10 million people by 2050. In advance, they should be like, okay, we need 10 million homes or apartments or whatever, and we need to start those now.
Yeah, but you can't start them now because you can't finance them. And this is the cruel double-edged sword that we're dealing with right now, which is why I agree
why
with
they
you.
create incentives?
If they're doing all these things
And businesses,
with relaxing the
food.
stress test on residential, maybe allowing some longer amortizations on renewals, I think they're going to have to do something for new construction. They really are.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.